So you want to level up your game and join the elite rank of high heat Hades players? In this first installment of the Beat the Heat series of guides, let me walk you through the Pact of Punishment and how to set it up optimally to facilitate your journey. Hey, what is up guys, this is Sleet, and in this long overdue video, I want to begin the high heat series of guides designed to help you increase the heat in your runs for the extra challenge, bragging rights, and new bounties, as well as Skelly's prizes. You know, those 3 mystery prizes hidden underneath 3 colorful drapes. What could they be? If you're a returning viewer, I probably already spoiled this for you, so my sincere apologies for that. But if you're new, I'll blur those for you. Anyway, regardless of their intrinsic value, Skelly's prizes provide tangible milestones for increasing the difficulty at 8, 16, and 32 heat respectively, so that's how I'll structure this video. First, I'll go over each of the 15 or 16 levers available in the Pact of Punishment, and then I'll go over some suggested, if not optimal, heat combinations at 8, 16, and 32 heat for various weapon aspects. So here we go. Alright, so here in the Pact of Punishment, there are 15 different conditions you can tinker with, 16 if you're on Hell mode, which I'll explain a little later in this video. Starting from the top, hard labor increases enemy damage by plus 20% per rank, up to a maximum of plus 100%. That means both minions and bosses will hit twice as hard at max rank. If you find yourself struggling to maintain health in your runs, I would suggest staying away as it only gives 5 heat max. Next is lasting consequences, which makes health restoration less effective by 25% per rank, up to a maximum of 100%. At max rank then, you cannot regain health whatsoever, whether by food, fountain, or otherwise. You must be thinking, that's crazy, how could anyone max this out? Great question. At a high level, there are 2 options driven by the Mirror of Night. The first is going Death Defiance and making sure not to take that much damage. The second, and the more realistic option, is going Stubborn Defiance, which allows you to die once in each and every chamber and gain back 30% health. By increasing your max health and taking advantage of Stubborn Defiance, including the Touch of Styx Dark bonus from Patroclus in Elysium, if you're lucky, you should be able to get through your run without too much strain. I could probably make a whole video on lasting consequences, as there are other tips and tricks involved, but for now I'll just suggest keeping both lasting consequences and hard labor at 0 or low level until you're ready for 40 plus heat. Next is convenience fee, which increases the price of shop items by plus 40% per rank, up to a maximum of plus 80%. Unless you're dead set on getting every boon on offer, this is one that you can confidently max out for 2 heat with minimal impact on your run. Jury Summons increases the number of foes in standard encounters by plus 20% per rank, up to a maximum of plus 60%. Depending on some of the other levers you pull, this could heavily impact your run. In particular, if you max out Tight Deadline, you may have a difficult time making the deadline. Or if you have double benefits package elite enemies, imagine having to fight an army of them. Yeah, it sucks, so be cautious with this one. Similarly, let's skip over to Calisthenics Program, which can be equally problematic depending on the circumstances. Each rank increases the total HP of all foes by plus 15% for a total of plus 30%. And by all foes, I also mean bosses, including dear old dad and his massive health pool, multiple phases, and healing abilities. This can be extremely problematic, especially if you max out Tight Deadline. Thus, be very careful with this lever, as it only nets you 2 heat anyways and can dramatically affect the pace of your run. Alright, let's go back to Extreme Measures, which has 4 ranks and nets you 10 heat at max rank, which is a lot. What does this lever do? Well, each rank will dramatically increase the difficulties of boss fights. The first rank for Tartarus, the second rank for Asphodel, and so on. If you've watched my other videos, then you already know what these alternative boss fights look like, and I plan to have another guide to help you tackle them. For now, I'll just say you're going to want to take on extreme measures eventually, so start small and start early in your heat journey. Next is, benefits package. This one is a bit of a mixed bag. This lever gives elite foes, the one with yellow shield bars, up to 2 extra perks, making them extra dangerous. And when I say dangerous, I'm talking about run-killing levels of danger, potentially. I say potentially because those perks are randomly selected from the following list of possible perks. Some combinations can cause you some inconvenience, but others are outright lethal. I'm talking about witches with super fast homing bullets or fast and furious flame wheels. Benefits package introduces a deadly RNG element to the game, but for 5 heat, it shouldn't be ignored. Next is a similar enemy upgrade. Middle management makes each of your mini-boss encounters more difficult by either doubling their number or giving them deadly enhancements. For example, in Tartarus, there will be 4 elite bombers instead of 2, and in Asphodel, the Medusa head teleports, while the falling rock sends out a wave upon impact. This heat option definitely changes up the mini-boss fights that you're used to, but the difficulty increase is definitely manageable. I recommend you keeping this on by default. Next is Underworld Custom, which requires you to purge 1 boon at the end of each biome. This can be a very easy to heat, as most often you end up with useless or near useless boons anyway, plus you get gold for purging them. However, there are times when you're presented with only your core boons that you'd hate to give up, and for that reason I would highly recommend maxing out and taking Fated Persuasion from the Mirror of Night so that you can re-roll in those instances. Next is Forced Overtime, increasing all enemies' move speed and attack speed by plus 20% per rank up to a total of plus 40%. Now, plus 40% doesn't sound like much, and you do get 6 heat for it, but believe me, that makes a huge difference, especially when paired with Benefits package with even more move and attack speed. Enemies can mow you down before you know what hit you, further exacerbated if you have a slow weapon like the Aspect of Arthur. I would suggest getting used to the plus 40% speed, but dial this down to plus 20% as needed. Next, for just 1 heat, Heightened Security increases the damage from all traps and magma by plus 400%. For the mathematically disinclined, that's 5 times more damage, which is a ridiculous amount of extra damage for just 1 heat. As an extreme example, in the extreme measures version of the Hades fight, those green pots that normally do 30 damage will do 150 damage. It's as shitty as it sounds. Thus, this is one that I only flip on when I just need that 1 extra heat to hit 50 heat, or something like that. Next, Routine Inspection. Each rank disables 3 bonuses from the Mirror of Night starting at the bottom. You can get a total of 8 heat at the cost of disabling the Mirror of Night completely. At the first rank, you'll primarily be giving up those extra chances for better boons, which isn't the hardest thing to give up, but after that, you're giving up some critical enhancements that you've come to depend on, like Thick Skin, Greater Reflex, and Death Defiances. Thus, I'd only venture into the higher territory here once you start tackling 40 plus heat. Next is Damage Control, which gives all enemies up to 2 damage barriers. Each barrier negates 1 instance of damage, whether that be a Hestia sniper shot or even just 1 tick of hangover. And this is a good example of different circumstances when damage control makes sense or not. When you have a build that hits light but hits often, like hangover or chain of lightning, etc., damage control is almost a free 2 heat. But if you hit hard and slow, like Hestia or Arthur, you want every hit to count and may not want to take this at all. Next is Approval Process, probably the most frustrating piece of RNG. What it does is, at rank 1, it takes away 1 of your 3 options whenever you're offered boons or upgrades, and at rank 2, you're left with just 1 option. It can be extremely aggravating when you're locked out of that very important boon or when you're forced to take a terrible hammer upgrade. But 5 heat is quite a lot, and you'll probably need to at least put one rank into this when you're taking on 40 plus heat. Until then, however, save yourself the headache and leave this off. Last but not least, tight deadline. At rank 1, you have an additive 9 minutes per biome to clear your run. That is, you will have an in-game timer starting at 9 minutes, and when you clear a biome, 9 additional minutes get added to your timer, and same with the next biome. At rank 2, it is 7 minutes, and at max rank, it is 5 minutes. If you're watching this high heat guide and you're consistently able to clear runs within 20 minutes or so, a 7-minute tight deadline is a free 3 heat. 5 minutes, however, is essentially a speedrunner training course, or rather, you should learn to be a speedrunner in order to clear 5 minutes, tight deadline. I plan to have a separate guide on how to go fast, so stay tuned for that. Oh, and I almost forgot, if you're playing on Hell mode, you have one additional and mandatory lever called Personal Liability for 1 additional heat. In regular mode, you may or may not have noticed that when Zagreus takes a burst barrage of damage, for example when eating Daddy's lasers, Zagreus briefly becomes impervious. Personal Liability removes that protection. In my hundreds of runs, I've only felt the benefit of that protection maybe a handful of times, so I would call this free heat. As I promised, here are a few suggested Pact of Punishment configurations to meet those tangible goals of 8, 16, and 32 heat. At 8 heat, the world is your oyster. Generally flipping just one lever here and there can easily get you to 8 heat with minimal impact on your run. As one suggestion, try this combination of underworld customs, plus 20% forced overtime, and 7-minute tight deadline. The options are still pretty wide open at 16 heat as well. At this point, however, I would personally suggest that you start attempting the harder versions of enemies, i.e. taking on extreme measures, benefits package, middle management, and forced overtime. Go one lever at a time so that you're not overwhelmed and can take your time learning how to fight them properly. But if you're desperately wanting that 16 heat Skelly prize, because it's so awesome, try something like this. In addition to the suggested 8 heat setup, add a rank to convenience fee, 2 ranks to extreme measures, 1 to benefits package, and 1 to middle management. The EM versions of the first 2 bosses are certainly stronger, but the differential isn't as great as that for the last 2 bosses. If they are giving you trouble, you can knock those back down and perhaps put 1 point into one of the first 4 levers. Now, 32 heat. This is where you really discover your strengths and weaknesses, in my opinion, and from what I've seen in message threads, forums, and other Hades YouTubers, people are very different. You'll also discover that different levers work better for particular weapon aspects and builds. In my first successful foray into 32 heat, my Pact of Punishment setup was something like this, and I believe it was with the aspect of Chiron on the bow. I slowly worked my way up to tackling Extreme Measures 4 and plus 40% forced overtime. I wasn't clearing them perfectly, but I could consistently get to the final boss fight with at least 2 Death Defiances and win more than 50% of the time. Apart from these, I pulled lightly on the low impact levers to taste. But definitely feel free to experiment. For example, once I learned to speedrun, I was able to max tight deadline, meaning I had a spare 3 heat. I could then drop down EM4 to EM3 instead. Or when using Aspect of Eris with Chain Lightning, for example, I would go right to maxing damage control for a free 2 heat, leaving room elsewhere. As a last bit of information and motivation, here is my Pact of Punishment setup for my recent 50 heat clear with the Aspect of Hestia. As you can see, nearly everything is maxed out. The biggest difference is probably the 100% hard labor and lasting consequences, and that is something I'll have to save for another video. But the takeaway is this: I am by no means an expert gamer, definitely more of an average one, and in general, I hardly ever put this much effort into getting good at a game. but Hades has been a joy to play and the journey was worth it. And with enough wisdom and patience, you too can achieve the same. So that's it for this video. Please look forward to the next one in this Beat the Heat series, in which I discuss tips on how to tackle the harder versions of bosses. Until then, good luck, Underworld adventurers!